For a long time, we were taught that the loudest voice wins, that if you don't explain yourself, you'll be misunderstood. If you don't defend yourself, you'll be defeated. So we talk, we argue, we over-explain our pain to people who were never listening. But one day, something changes. You realize that silence isn't what you use when you have nothing to say. It's what you choose when you finally understand your worth. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength, controlled, deliberate, unshakable. Let me tell you why. Silence is self-respect because it begins the moment you stop needing permission to be who you already are. It shows up when you realize that your value doesn't increase every time you explain yourself, and it doesn't decrease every time someone misunderstands you. For a long time, many of us were conditioned to believe that being heard meant being loud, that being right meant being reactive, and that dignity had something to do with winning arguments. But real self-respect is quieter than that. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase approval. It doesn't beg to be understood by people who have already decided not to listen. Think about the moments when you felt the strongest pull to speak. Not because you had something meaningful to add, but because you felt challenged, doubted, or dismissed. That urge to defend yourself comes from a very human place, the need to be seen, to be validated, to be treated fairly. But self-respect asks a different question. It asks, who am I speaking for right now? If the answer is fear, pride, or insecurity, silence becomes an act of strength, not surrender. In real life, you see this play out every day. At work, someone questions your capability in a meeting, maybe subtly, maybe directly. The room goes quiet for a moment, and all eyes turn toward you. The instinct is to react, to list your achievements, to justify your presence. But self-respect pauses. It recognizes that competence doesn't need a speech, it needs consistency. Over time, people remember who delivers, not who debates. Your silence in that moment is not an admission of weakness, it's a refusal to lower yourself into a conversation that doesn't honor your work. Psychology supports this more than we realize. Studies on emotional regulation show that people who can pause before responding tend to experience lower stress and are perceived as more confident and trustworthy. Silence gives your nervous system time to settle. It keeps you from saying something that costs you peace just to win a moment. Self-respect is choosing long-term dignity over short-term relief. There's also a deeper layer to it. Silence becomes self-respect when you stop explaining your boundaries. You don't owe everyone access to your thoughts, your history, or your healing. When you constantly explain why something hurts you, why you need space, or why you've changed, you're teaching people that your boundaries are negotiable. Silence teaches the opposite. It says, this is where I stand, without turning it into a debate. Think about relationships that drained you. The ones where every concern turned into an argument, where your feelings had to be proven instead of respected. At some point, explaining becomes exhausting. You realize that the right people don't require endless clarification. They listen the first time. Silence, in those moments, isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's self-respect, choosing to step away from conversations that only exist to keep you stuck. There's a story many people share without realizing it's the same one. Someone walks away quietly from a situation that no longer aligns with who they are. No dramatic announcement, no public justification, just distance. At first, others may misinterpret that silence as defeat. But weeks pass, months pass, and the person who stayed silent grows stronger, calmer, more focused. The silence protected their energy while they rebuilt. That's self-respect in motion. Silence also changes how people treat you. When you don't rush to fill every gap, people pay more attention when you do speak. When you don't explain every choice, your decisions carry more weight. This isn't about manipulation or mystery. It's about presence. Silence grounded in self-respect creates a sense of stability. People feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they respond to it. In moments of conflict, silence can feel risky. We worry that if we don't speak, the story will be written without us. But self-respect understands something important. Not every story needs your correction. Some misunderstandings resolve themselves. Some opinions don't matter. And some people reveal more about themselves the longer you let them talk. Silence gives space for truth to surface without your interference. There's also a personal freedom that comes with this kind of silence. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop carrying the weight of other people's assumptions. You sleep better. You think clearer. Your energy stops leaking into places that never gave anything back. That's not withdrawal from the world, it's alignment with yourself. Self-respect doesn't mean you never speak. It means you choose when your words matter. It means your silence is intentional, not fearful. You speak when it builds, not when it drains. You respond when it aligns with your values, not when it satisfies someone else's expectations. That kind of silence takes courage because it asks you to trust who you are without external confirmation. Over time, you notice a shift. You're less reactive, less defensive, less interested in proving anything, and more grounded, more steady, more at peace. People may still misunderstand you, but it doesn't shake you the way it used to. Because your self-respect is no longer dependent on being seen correctly by everyone. It's rooted in knowing yourself clearly. Silence, then, becomes a form of self-honoring. It's the space where you choose dignity over noise, growth over reaction, and truth over performance. It's not empty. It's full of restraint, awareness, and quiet confidence. And once you experience that kind of silence, you realize it was never about holding back your voice. It was about finally standing in your worth without needing to announce it. Silence protects your peace, because not every moment deserves your reaction, and not every person deserves access to your inner world. Peace is fragile when it's constantly exposed, when every comment, every opinion, every provocation is allowed to reach inside and disturb what you're trying to build. Silence becomes the gatekeeper. It's the moment you decide that your emotional energy is valuable and you're no longer willing to spend it carelessly. There was a time when many of us believed that staying quiet meant losing. That if we didn't respond immediately, the other person would win. But real life teaches a different lesson. The more you engage with chaos, the more chaos multiplies. Silence interrupts that cycle. It doesn't feed the fire. It lets the flames die on their own. And in that quiet space, your peace has room to breathe. Think about how often conflict starts small. A comment, a message, a look that feels off. The mind jumps in, fills the gaps, builds a story, and suddenly you're emotionally invested in something that doesn't deserve that much power over you. Silence slows this down. It gives you distance from the narrative your emotions are trying to write. That distance is where peace lives. There are people who thrive on reaction. They don't necessarily want understanding. They want attention. They poke, provoke, and pressure until you respond, because your response confirms their influence over you. When you stay silent, something interesting happens. The dynamic shifts. Without your reaction, their behavior loses momentum. They're left alone with their own noise. Silence protects your peace by refusing to participate in games that only exist to drain you. Neuroscience shows that constant emotional engagement keeps the brain in a state of high alert, increasing stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this wears you down mentally and physically. Silence, especially in the face of provocation, allows the nervous system to regulate. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing deepens. You come back to yourself. Peace isn't just emotional, it's biological. In relationships, silence can be misunderstood, especially by those who are used to chaos as a form of connection. Not every relationship survives peace. Some were built on conflict, on intensity, on constant emotional highs and lows. When you choose silence, you're choosing stability over drama. And that choice reveals a lot. Some people will respect it. Others will resist it. Either way, your peace becomes clearer. There's a difference between silence and suppression. Suppression pushes feelings down until they explode. Silence, when chosen consciously, allows feelings to pass without controlling your actions. You still feel, you still care. But you don't let emotion dictate your behavior. That's not emotional distance. That's emotional mastery. Think about the last time you stayed silent instead of responding immediately. Maybe it was hard. Maybe your hands wanted to type something sharp, something defensive, something final. But you didn't. Hours passed, then a day, and the intensity faded. What felt urgent lost its grip. That's peace protecting itself. Silence gave time a chance to do what it does best, put things in perspective. There's also peace in privacy, in not sharing every plan, every struggle, every victory. When too many people know your moves, your peace becomes vulnerable to their opinions, their doubts, their projections. Silence creates a private space where growth can happen without interference. It's easier to stay centered when fewer voices are pulling at you. You see this in people who have endured a lot and come out calmer, not harder. They don't explain their past. They don't advertise their healing. They move differently. They speak less, listen more, and react with intention. Their silence isn't empty, it's full of lessons learned the hard way. And that quiet presence feels safe, steady, and grounded. Peace also means knowing when a conversation is no longer about resolution. Some discussions don't move forward, they move in circles. Silence steps off the ride. It recognizes that understanding can't be forced. You can offer clarity, but you can't make someone receive it. Protecting your peace means accepting that and letting go. In a world that constantly demands response, notifications, messages, opinions, silence is a radical act. It's choosing stillness in a culture of noise. It's choosing depth over immediacy. Every time you don't react impulsively, you reclaim a piece of your peace. Over time, those moments add up. You become less shaken, less reactive, more anchored. Silence also teaches you to trust yourself. When you stop looking outside for validation through argument or explanation, you start listening inward. You hear your own thoughts more clearly. Your intuition gets louder. Peace grows in that internal clarity. You're no longer at war with every external trigger because you're aligned internally. There will be moments when silence costs you misunderstanding. People may assume you don't care, that you're distant, that you've given up. But peace doesn't require everyone's approval. It requires your honesty with yourself. If speaking would disturb your balance more than it would solve the problem, silence is not avoidance, it's wisdom. Over time, you notice the change. Your mind is quieter. Your reactions are slower, but stronger. You recover faster from emotional hits. You're not dragged into every storm. And when you do choose to speak, your words carry weight because they come from a place of calm, not chaos. Silence protects your peace by reminding you that your inner world matters, that your energy is finite, that not every battle is yours to fight. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all, except stay grounded, stay present, and let your peace remain untouched. Silence builds inner power because it creates space, and space is where strength is formed. When the noise fades, when the opinions, expectations, and constant demands of the world quiet down, you begin to hear something deeper. Your own thoughts, your own instincts, your own truth. Inner power doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly in moments when you choose not to react, not to perform, not to explain who you are to people who aren't ready to understand. Most of the world mistakes noise for confidence. The loud voice, the quick response, the sharp comeback, these are often praised as signs of strength. But real strength is steady. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. Silence builds that steadiness. It allows you to observe before you act, to feel before you decide, to understand before you respond. And in that pause, something powerful happens. You take control of yourself. Think about the moments when life tested you the most. Not the moments when everything was going right, but the ones when you were misunderstood, underestimated, or challenged. In those moments, your first impulse was probably to defend yourself, to prove something, to push back. But every time you resisted that impulse and chose silence instead, you learned something about yourself. You learned that you could survive discomfort without reacting, that you could hold your ground without raising your voice, that you could remain whole even when the situation felt unfair. That realization is inner power. Silence trains your mind. It teaches patience in a world that rewards immediacy. It teaches restraint in a culture that celebrates excess. When you stay silent, you give your mind time to process instead of explode. You begin to notice patterns, who speaks to understand and who speaks to dominate, who listens and who waits for their turn to talk. This awareness sharpens your judgment. And sharp judgment is a form of power that can't be taken from you. In real life, you see inner power in people who don't need to fill every pause. They don't rush to share their opinions. They listen, they watch. When they finally speak, their words land differently because they're rooted in thought, not impulse. Silence gave them that authority. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands respect without asking for it. There's also a strength that comes from being comfortable alone with your thoughts. Many people avoid silence because it forces them to face themselves, the doubts, the regrets, the unanswered questions. But when you stop running from silence, you stop running from yourself. You sit with the discomfort. You let it teach you. Over time, what once felt heavy becomes manageable. What once scared you becomes familiar, and familiarity with yourself is one of the strongest forms of inner power there is. Silence also builds resilience. When you don't react to every external trigger, you stop giving your power away. Every emotional reaction costs energy. Every argument drains something from you. Silence conserves that energy. It keeps your strength intact. This is why people who are calm under pressure often outlast those who are reactive. They're not stronger because they fight harder. They're stronger because they choose their battles wisely. Neuroscience supports this idea. The ability to pause and reflect activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision making and emotional regulation. Reactivity, on the other hand, is driven by the amygdala, which responds to perceived threats. Silence shifts control from fear to clarity, from impulse to intention. That shift is the foundation of inner power. There's a quiet confidence that develops when you no longer need external validation. When you stop measuring your worth by how quickly people respond to you, how loudly they acknowledge you, or how often they agree with you. Silence helps break that dependency. In the absence of constant feedback, you learn to trust your own judgment. You stop asking, do they approve? And start asking, does this align with who I am? That question changes everything. Inner power also grows when you allow others to underestimate you. That sounds uncomfortable, but it's true. When people think you're quiet because you're weak, they reveal their assumptions. They show you how they think. Silence gives them space to do that. And while they're busy misjudging you, you're learning, preparing, and strengthening yourself. When the moment comes for action, you're ready, not because you announced it, but because you built it in silence. There are countless real-life examples of this. People who spent years unnoticed, working quietly, improving their skills, sharpening their focus. No applause, no recognition, just discipline. Then one day, they step forward and the world is surprised. But the surprise wasn't sudden success, it was unseen preparation. Silence was the training ground. Silence also deepens emotional strength. When you don't immediately express every feeling, you learn to understand it first. You learn the difference between anger and hurt, between fear and instinct, between ego and self-respect. This emotional literacy gives you control. Instead of being pushed around by your emotions, you use them as information. That's power. Not suppression, not denial, but understanding. In conversations, silence can be disarming. When someone expects a reaction and doesn't get one, they're forced to confront their own words. Silence turns the mirror back on them. It's not aggressive. It's not passive. It's neutral. And neutrality in emotionally charged situations is powerful. It keeps you centered while others lose balance. There's also a spiritual dimension to this inner power. In silence, you reconnect with purpose. Away from the noise, you remember why you started, what matters to you, what you're willing to stand for, and what you're willing to walk away from. That clarity strengthens your resolve. You're no longer easily swayed because your foundation is internal, not external. Over time, silence reshapes your presence. You move differently. You speak less, but with more intention. You react less, but with more impact. People feel your energy before they hear your words. That's not intimidation. That's inner power expressed through calm. Silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes you solid. It grounds you. It teaches you to trust time, trust process, trust yourself. When challenges come, and they always do, you're not thrown off course. You've already learned how to stand still in the middle of pressure. You've already learned how to breathe through uncertainty. The world will always be loud. There will always be opinions, expectations, and distractions pulling at you. But inner power grows in the spaces between those things. In the moments you choose stillness over reaction. In the days you choose focus over noise. In the years you choose growth over recognition. Silence builds inner power because it teaches you that strength doesn't need to shout. It just needs to endure. And when you've built that kind of strength, quiet, grounded, unshakable, you don't need to prove it. You carry it with you. And it shows, even when you say nothing at all. Silence lets your actions speak because words, no matter how carefully chosen, are still only promises until they are backed by behavior. Anyone can talk about who they are, what they believe, or what they intend to do. It takes far more strength to live those things consistently without announcing them. Silence creates the space where action becomes visible. When you stop explaining yourself, people stop listening to what you say and start watching what you do. And that shift changes everything. In a world that rewards constant expression, choosing silence can feel uncomfortable. We're encouraged to clarify, justify, and narrate our lives in real time. Social platforms have taught us to announce growth before it's real, to share intentions before they've been tested. But growth doesn't happen in front of an audience. It happens quietly, in repetition, in discipline, in moments no one applauds. Silence protects that process. It keeps your focus on becoming, not performing. Think about how often words are used to cover insecurity. When someone keeps telling you they're strong, they're loyal, they're committed, it's often because those qualities haven't fully taken root yet. Real strength doesn't need reinforcement through speech. It shows up on time. It follows through. It stays when it's hard and leaves when it's necessary. Silence allows those actions to stand on their own without decoration. In relationships, this truth becomes clear very quickly. Someone can promise change 100 times, but one consistent action outweighs all of it. Silence in this context isn't withdrawal, it's alignment. Instead of arguing about intentions, you let behavior answer the question. Over time, patterns speak louder than apologies or explanations ever could. Silence lets reality be the message. There's a certain dignity in letting your actions tell your story. When you stop defending yourself verbally, you give time the opportunity to reveal who you really are. Time is honest. It exposes inconsistency and rewards persistence. Silence trusts time. It says, I don't need to convince you today. You'll see. That kind of patience requires confidence because it means you're willing to be misunderstood temporarily in exchange for being respected eventually. You see this in professional life all the time. The person who talks the most in meetings isn't always the one who delivers. The one who quietly prepares, executes, and improves often becomes indispensable without ever having to say it out loud. Their reputation is built on results, not rhetoric. Silence didn't make them invisible. It made their impact undeniable. Psychology supports this as well. Research on credibility shows that people trust behavior over verbal claims, especially over time. Consistency between words and actions builds trust. But when actions stand alone without constant explanation, they're often perceived as more authentic. Silence removes the noise and lets consistency shine. Silence also keeps you from over-promising. When you speak less about what you're going to do, you free yourself to focus on doing it well. There's less pressure to perform for others and more space to commit to the work itself. This shift builds integrity. You're no longer motivated by external validation, but by internal standards. Your actions become a reflection of who you are, not who you want others to think you are. There's something powerful about restraint, about choosing not to announce every move. When you keep your plans quiet, they're protected from unnecessary opinions and doubts. Too many voices can weaken resolve. Silence shields your intentions until they're strong enough to stand on their own. When the results finally appear, they speak with clarity and confidence. History is full of examples of people who were underestimated because they didn't speak loudly or often. Their quiet was mistaken for lack of ambition or ability. But while others were busy talking, they were building. And when the moment came, their actions redefined how they were seen. Silence was never absence, it was preparation. Silence also changes how conflict unfolds. Instead of engaging in endless debates about who's right, you let your choices show where you stand. Boundaries don't need lengthy explanations. Consistent behavior communicates them clearly. When you stop arguing your values and start living them, you gain a different kind of authority. People may not agree with you, but they understand you. There's also a deeper emotional freedom that comes with letting actions speak. When you're not constantly explaining yourself, you're less entangled in others' perceptions. You stop carrying the burden of correcting every misunderstanding. That energy returns to you. It strengthens your focus. It deepens your presence. You become more grounded, less reactive. Silence teaches humility, too. When you let your work speak, you accept that recognition may come slowly or not at all. You do what you do because it matters to you, not because it guarantees applause. That humility doesn't weaken you, it steadies you. It keeps you connected to purpose instead of ego. Over time, people begin to notice the pattern. They see reliability. They see follow-through. They see growth that wasn't advertised. And when they finally ask, how did you do it? The answer is simple. You didn't talk about it. You did it. Silence also protects you from the temptation to respond to criticism impulsively. Instead of arguing against every judgment, you let your progress be the response. Criticism loses power when it's met with improvement rather than defensiveness. Silence turns feedback into fuel, not fire. There's a quiet confidence that develops when you trust your actions enough to stand without explanation. You walk into rooms differently. You listen more. You speak when it matters. Your presence feels solid because it's backed by substance. People sense that. They may not know why, but they respect it. Silence doesn't mean you never speak. It means you choose your moments. It means when you do speak, your words align with your actions. That alignment is rare, and it's powerful. It creates trust. It creates credibility. It creates impact. In the end, silence lets your actions speak because action is the most honest language there is. It doesn't exaggerate. It doesn't excuse. It simply shows. And when your life becomes the message, you no longer need to explain who you are. You're living the answer. Silence is emotional mastery because it represents the moment you stop being controlled by what you feel and start understanding it instead. Emotions are powerful, but they are not meant to be the driver of every decision. They are signals, not commands. Silence gives you the space to read those signals without immediately acting on them. In that space, you gain control, not by suppressing what you feel, but by choosing how you respond. Most emotional damage doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from what we say or do in the heat of the moment. A sharp reply, a defensive message, a reaction fueled by anger or fear can undo years of trust in seconds. Silence interrupts that chain reaction. It slows time down. It allows the initial surge of emotion to pass so clarity can take its place. That pause is not weakness. It's discipline. In everyday life, you see how rare this kind of discipline is. Someone feels disrespected and reacts instantly. Someone feels ignored and lashes out. Someone feels hurt and says something they can't take back. Silence chooses a different path. It acknowledges the feeling without letting it hijack behavior. You still feel the anger, the disappointment, the frustration, but you don't let it define the moment. Neuroscience explains why this matters. Emotional reactions are often driven by the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for survival instincts. When it takes over, logic shuts down. Silence gives the prefrontal cortex, the center of reasoning and judgment, time to regain control. In simple terms, silence helps you move from reacting like you're under attack to responding like you're in control. That shift is emotional mastery. Think about the strongest people you've met, not the loudest or most aggressive, but the ones who remain calm under pressure. When things go wrong, they don't panic. When they're challenged, they don't explode. When they're criticized, they listen. That calm isn't accidental. It's built through countless moments of choosing silence over impulse. They've trained themselves to pause, to breathe, to think before acting. Silence also allows you to separate emotion from identity. Feeling angry doesn't mean you are an angry person. Feeling hurt doesn't mean you are broken. Feeling afraid doesn't mean you are weak. Silence gives you enough distance to see that emotions pass, but your character remains. When you act from silence, you act from values, not moods. That's the difference between being emotionally driven and emotionally grounded. In relationships, emotional mastery is often tested the hardest. When you care about someone, emotions run deeper and reactions are stronger. Silence in these moments can feel risky. You worry that not responding means you don't care, or that the other person will misinterpret your quiet. But silence, when paired with intention, is often the most caring response. It prevents words spoken in anger from causing lasting harm. It gives both sides space to cool down, to reflect, to return to the conversation with understanding instead of accusation. There's a quiet strength in being able to sit with discomfort. Many people speak to escape it. They fill the silence with explanations, justifications, or blame because sitting with unresolved emotion feels unbearable. Emotional mastery means you can stay present even when it's uncomfortable. You don't need immediate relief. You trust that clarity will come if you give it time. Silence also reveals emotional patterns. When you stop reacting automatically, you start noticing what triggers you and why. You see which situations consistently pull you off balance and which ones don't. That awareness is empowering. You're no longer surprised by your reactions because you understand them. And when you understand something, you can change it. In moments of conflict, silence can feel like standing still while everything around you moves fast. But that stillness gives you perspective. You see the bigger picture. You recognize what actually matters and what doesn't. Many arguments are fueled by ego rather than truth. Silence helps you distinguish between the two. You learn when to engage and when to let go. There's also emotional mastery in choosing silence when you're misunderstood. The instinct is to correct the narrative, to defend your intentions. But not every misunderstanding needs immediate clarification. Sometimes silence allows the truth to reveal itself over time. It protects you from exhausting yourself, trying to manage other people's perceptions. Emotional mastery understands that you can't control how others feel or think, only how you respond. Silence doesn't mean emotional absence. It means emotional presence without chaos. You're fully aware of what you feel, but you're not ruled by it. This balance creates inner stability. When life throws challenges your way, you're not knocked off course as easily. You recover faster. You adapt more smoothly. You stay connected to yourself. There's also a deep respect that comes from this kind of calm. People may not always agree with you, but they trust you. They know you won't react impulsively or say things you don't mean. Your words carry weight because they're chosen, not spilled. Silence gives your voice credibility. Emotional mastery through silence also changes how you treat yourself. When you stop reacting harshly to your own mistakes, you create room for growth. Instead of spiraling into self-criticism, you pause, reflect, and learn. Silence becomes compassion directed inward. It's the understanding that growth doesn't require punishment, only awareness. Over time, silence reshapes your emotional landscape. You're less reactive, less defensive, less drained. You become more thoughtful, more intentional, more at ease. Life doesn't stop being challenging, but you stop being overwhelmed by it. That's the power of emotional mastery. Silence teaches you that strength isn't about control over others, it's about control over yourself. It's not about suppressing emotion, but about channeling it wisely. When you master that, you don't need to prove it. It shows in your calm, your clarity, and the way you move through the world without being pulled apart by every feeling that passes through you. So no, silence is not weakness. It's discipline. It's clarity. It's strength without noise. You don't need to prove your value to those who refuse to see it. You don't need to explain your growth to those who stayed the same. Sometimes the most powerful sentence you'll ever speak is the one you choose not to say. Stay calm, stay grounded, let your silence do the talking.